Jackson police are searching for the man they say killed a woman while she was lying in bed yesterday. According to JPD, Zverian Brent shot and killed Terrencia Jackson on Fleetwood Drive. Another man who was also shot and sent to the hospital. If you have any information about Brent, please call Jackson Police or Crime Stoppers.
Terrencia Jackson is lying in bed, pulled into the blanket, laughing quietly at something being said just off camera. The room is dark except for a thin wash of blue light. Whoever is filming doesn't show his face, just his voice, and hers, and the small, unremarkable comfort of two people talking each other to sleep. It is an ordinary night. Nothing about it suggests what is coming. Hours after that footage ends, in the early morning hours of June 7, 2022, the carport door of that same house gives way. Not quietly. It splinters inward, the kind of sound that, on a quiet residential street in South Jackson, Mississippi, should have woken the whole block. A man walks through the house he isn't supposed to be in anymore. He doesn't stop in the living room. He doesn't pause in the hallway. He goes straight to the back of the house, to the one room he already knows. Inside, Terrencia Jackson and her boyfriend are still in that same bed. What happens in the next few minutes leaves Terrencia dead, her boyfriend fighting for his life, and the man who entered that bedroom running from the house. But to understand why that door came down at all, you have to go back further than that morning. Because the man who broke into that bedroom wasn't a stranger to it. Barely a year before he became an intruder in her home, he was supposed to be her husband. This is Lethal Obsession, where we go beyond the headlines to understand not just what happened, but the behavior and choices that shaped what came next. This one begins with a proposal and ends in the same bedroom where that quiet, ordinary night was filmed. In May of 2021, Terrencia Jackson posted something for anyone who knew her to see. She was entering her 25th year, she wrote, as somebody's fiancé. The man she named was Zverian Brent. That promise didn't come out of nowhere. It came from somewhere specific. A school, a neighborhood, a shared history that started years before either of them ever imagined how it would end. Terrencia Jackson was born on May 12, 1996, in Jackson, Mississippi, the second of 8 children to Antoinette Jackson and Terrence Womack. She graduated from Provine High School, went to work at UPS, and stayed a faithful member of Jehovah Jireh Church. She was raising a daughter, Zerencia.
Do you love us? Can you come get us? Cause we wanna ride around the town with you. Cause we miss you and we love you. To your daddy. Say Z, do you love us? Can we route you around the city? Cause we love you and we miss you and we want you.
And by every account from the people who knew her, she was someone who showed up. For her family, for her church, for the running joke she never let up on with her stepfather, McDuffie, teasing him every chance she got. That was Terrencia, steady, present, building an ordinary life in the same city where she was born. Zverian Brent walked those same Provine High hallways, graduating in 2011, and never strayed far from the South Jackson streets both of them called home. Their connection wasn't something that formed out of nowhere later. It was rooted in shared geography, a shared school, years before either of them saw the other as anything more than a familiar face. By the time that changed, Brent already had a record. In 2015, he was indicted on felony charges for possession of marijuana and hydrocodone, carrying a .38 caliber handgun at the time of his arrest. 2 years later, in 2017, he faced a similar felony indictment for marijuana possession, again armed, this time with a .40 caliber Glock. That 2017 case was remanded to his file in August of 2019. The earlier 2015 case remained open even longer, not dismissed until July of 2021, by Hinds County Circuit Judge Winston Kidd, at the request of Brent's own probation officer, mere weeks before an event that would come to define how the public understood him. None of this raised alarm in Terrencia's circle at the time. Brent already had children from previous relationships, And a rough patch on someone's record wasn't automatically disqualifying to the people around her. What mattered was how he showed up now, day to day, not a case file from years earlier. And for a while, how he showed up looked like commitment. Around 2016, Zverian Brent and Terrencia Jackson moved from familiar faces to something more serious. By July of that year, he was telling people they were expecting. Their daughter arrived on November 21st, 2016. They named her Terrencia, a name pieced together from both of theirs, a small, permanent signal of how deliberately they were building this. Brent didn't treat the moment lightly. He had Terrencia's name tattooed on him, placed right alongside the name of another daughter from an earlier relationship, ink he'd carry regardless of what came next. For a man already juggling 2 prior arrests and children from before, this looked, at the time, like commitment rather than repetition. Terrencia stepped into motherhood with the same steadiness that defined her at work. She wasn't chasing a picture-perfect version of family life. She was building something functional, something that held up day to day, on a UPS schedule and a boutique she ran on the side. People who knew her would later describe a woman whose focus sharpened the moment her daughter entered the picture, less about grand gestures, more about consistency. By May of 2017, less than a year after Terrencia's birth, Brent and Jackson were presenting themselves publicly as a committed couple, a family unit built around their daughter, even without a ring involved yet. Whatever hesitation either of them might have carried before, it wasn't visible in how they showed up together going forward. They documented it, publicly and often. Videos of the 3 of them together, a daughter old enough to smile on camera, calling out to a father who filmed back. None of it read as performance at the time. It read as a young family finding its footing, the kind of ordinary milestones that don't draw scrutiny until much later, when someone goes looking for the moment things started to shift. There was no single post, no comment, no photo from 2017 that hinted at where this would eventually lead. That's part of what makes this period difficult to look back on. Nothing about it was designed to raise concern. A man with an unresolved criminal history was building a public, photographed life with the woman he'd go on to kill 5 years later, and nobody watching at the time had any reason to see it coming. What existed instead was a family taking shape in real time. A newborn, a tattoo, a public commitment years before any formal proposal, and 2 people from the same neighborhood, the same high school, now raising a daughter together. On paper and in public, it looked like the beginning of something lasting. It wasn't. By the spring of 2021, Terrencia Jackson had already given Zverian Brent more chances than most people give anyone. She'd said as much herself, publicly, more than once. At one point, she posted a message aimed at every woman who had walked away from him before her, thanking them for letting him go, and promising she would do what they hadn't: stay. It read as devotion at the time. Looking back, it reads as something closer to a pattern she was naming out loud without fully seeing it. On May 12, 2021, that pattern reached its high point. It was her 25th birthday, and Brent had arranged something bigger than a private moment.
$15. Yeah. Fuck it up.
At Johnny T's Bistro and Blues on Farish Street in downtown Jackson, in front of family and friends who'd kept the secret for weeks, he got down on one knee. She said yes before she'd even fully processed the question. The room reacted the way rooms do at moments like that, and for one night, none of what came before or after mattered. The next day, she put it in writing. She thanked God, thanked the people who'd helped pull off the surprise, and thanked Brent specifically for one thing: not giving up on her, no matter how many times she'd tried to leave. She said it directly. She had tried to walk away from this relationship before, more than once, and every time, he'd stayed down, refusing to let it end. At the time, she framed that as loyalty. A man who fights to keep you is a man who values you, the logic goes. 2 weeks later, they went out again to properly celebrate, and by her account, she made sure the day was everything it deserved to be. None of this looked like a warning sign in real time. It looked like a love story reaching its natural next step, a public proposal, a joyful reaction, a woman entering a new year of her life with a ring and a plan. But sit with her own words for a moment. Not giving up, no matter how many times she tried to leave. That's not a description of two people growing closer together. That's a description of one person repeatedly trying to create distance, and the other refusing to allow it. Nobody in that room at Johnny T's that night was thinking about what that pattern might mean if it ever showed up again, later, under different circumstances, with higher stakes. It would. Patterns like this rarely announce themselves early. Subscribe if you want to keep tracing them with us, because what happens next didn't stay private for long. By early 2022, something had changed. Terrencia never explained what. Not publicly, not in any post or caption that survives from that period. Whatever happened between her and Zverian Brent in those final months together stayed exactly where she wanted it, private. What she did share, though, told its own story. She began reposting messages about self-worth, the kind of content people share when they're processing something without naming it directly. One repost warned that the more chances you give someone, the less they end up valuing you. That a person who knows you'll never walk away stops being afraid of losing you. Another spoke about wanting a partner who stays locked in the whole way through, not just in the easy, early stages of a relationship. A third touched on releasing the father of her children to show up however he chose, without letting his choices pull her off course. None of these posts mentioned Brent by name. None of them needed to. Her focus, by all appearances, had shifted toward her daughter, her own peace, and the kind of mother she wanted to keep being for Terrencia, regardless of what was or wasn't working with Terrencia's father. It reads less like anger and more like exhaustion, the kind that builds quietly over years rather than arriving all at once. Around this same time, she started seeing someone new. His name was Henry Perry. Unlike the very public engagement at Johnny T's less than a year earlier, this relationship stayed almost entirely out of view. No announcement post, no tagged photos, no caption naming what they were to each other. Terrencia kept it that way deliberately, and for a while, Henry was fine with that arrangement too. It's worth noting what this period doesn't contain. No restraining order. No police report. No public accusation against Brent that would show up later in any investigative file. Just a woman, quietly stepping back from one relationship's public narrative, and just as quietly beginning another, choosing privacy the second time in a way she hadn't the first. Whether that privacy was protective instinct or simple preference, nobody can say for certain. What can be said is this. For the first time in years, part of her life existed entirely outside Zverian Brent's view. That wouldn't last. That footage from earlier, the two of them talking each other to sleep, was recorded hours before what happened next.
I think they know you. I think they know you.
They might do. From you.
I don't know you.
By 4 a.m. on June 7, 2022, Terrencia Jackson and Henry Perry were asleep at the home they shared on Fleetwood Drive in South Jackson, Mississippi. Zverian Brent forced his way in through the carport door and moved straight to the rear bedroom. What happened next lasted only moments. A brief confrontation, then gunfire. Terrencia was struck multiple times. Henry was hit as well, but managed to return fire before Brent turned and ran. When first responders arrived at the scene, Terrencia was unresponsive. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Henry was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, his survival uncertain in those first hours. There's a detail that carries weight here, one that has nothing to do with what happened inside that bedroom and everything to do with what should have already been resolved before that morning. Brent's 2015 felony case, the one tied to narcotics and a firearm, hadn't been formally closed until July of 2021, less than a year before this. His 2017 case was still sitting on his record as well. Both arrests had involved a weapon, and on the morning he kicked in that carport door, he showed up armed again. 2 prior cases, 2 firearms, neither one enough, on its own, to have prevented what happened on Fleetwood Drive. Within hours, Jackson police had a name and were actively searching. A public alert went out, describing a man wanted in connection with a woman's shooting death, a second man also shot and hospitalized, and a request for anyone with information to come forward.
Jackson police are searching for the man they say killed a woman while she was lying in bed yesterday. According to JPD, Zverian Brent shot and killed Terrencia Jackson on Fleetwood Drive, another man who was also shot and sent to the hospital. If you have any information about Brent, please call Jackson Police or Crime Stoppers.
Terrencia Jackson was 26 years old. She left behind a daughter who would grow up without her, and a boyfriend fighting for his life in a hospital bed. Uncertain in those first hours whether he'd make it through the night, his own relationship had never been made public. The story doesn't end on Fleetwood Drive that morning. It continues in the search for the man who left it, and in a court file, still years from being resolved. The day after the shooting, Henry Perry's mother, Toya Lash, wrote something online that made clear how the people closest to this weren't waiting for a courtroom to name what happened. She called it exactly what it looked like to her: jealousy, selfishness, a family torn apart, a little girl left without her mother. That same day, a 28-year-old woman named Vita Valentine was taken into custody, charged as an accessory after the fact for helping Brent stay off the radar in the hours after the shooting. What her connection to him actually was has never been made public. Brent himself was still out there and hurt, struck during the exchange of gunfire at the house. U.S. Marshals located him on June 9th, and he was treated at the University of Mississippi Medical Center under police custody before being arrested and denied bond. 9 days later, Terrencia's family and friends gathered for a balloon release in her memory, followed on June 25th by her funeral at Black Chapel MB Church, where her brother delivered the eulogy. Henry Perry was there too, present for a service that existed because of a relationship he'd never had the chance to make public while she was alive. One detail from this period never resolves cleanly. When Henry eventually spoke publicly about the relationship, he described it as a rocky road going on 3 years, while the public record shows Brent and Terrencia still presenting as a family as recently as December 2021. One of Terrencia's friends addressed it only by saying Terrencia didn't owe anyone a full explanation of her private life. Nobody has ever fully clarified how the two timelines fit together. What's certain is this: by the time Brent was in custody, Terrencia was already gone. Henry was recovering from wounds that nearly killed him, and a case file was forming that would take more than 3 years to reach a courtroom.
A Jackson man has been convicted of shooting and killing his ex-girlfriend during a home invasion 3 years ago. 33-year-old Zverian Brent was found guilty today of second-degree murder in the death of Terrencia Jackson. He was also convicted of aggravated assault for shooting her boyfriend at the time, Henry Perry, in June 2022.
On September 11th, 2025, more than 3 years after Terrencia Jackson was killed on Fleetwood Drive, the Hinds County District Attorney's Office made it official. A jury had found Zverian Brent guilty of second-degree murder in her death and guilty of aggravated assault for what he did to Henry Perry. District Attorney Jody Owens didn't soften the language in his statement. Kicking in a door and shooting someone in their own bed, he said, is a shockingly cold-blooded act, and now the man responsible would answer for it. Toya Lash, Henry's mother, posted again that day, just as she had in the days right after the shooting. 3 years earlier, she wrote, she'd gotten the worst phone call of her life. Her son had been shot, and Terrencia was gone. She said the family showed up for Terrencia that day in court, the way they'd shown up for her since it happened, and that justice had finally been served, for both of them. There's a detail worth sitting with here, one that surfaced in the months between the arrest and the trial. That August, Years after Terrencia's death, Brent posted a video of their daughter, Terrencia, on her first day of school, writing about her mother watching down on her, proud of the girl she was becoming. The response online was immediate and unsparing. The man writing about Terrencia watching over their daughter was the same reason Terrencia couldn't be the one standing at that bus stop herself. Brent faced a maximum of 40 years on the murder charge and 20 years on the assault charge, a total exposure of 60 years given his prior felony history and Mississippi's habitual offender provisions. He was scheduled to be sentenced on September 30th, 2025. By then, the questions that never got fully answered stayed that way. Henry's account of a relationship going back roughly 3 years, set against documented proof that Brent and Terrencia were still presenting as a family as recently as December 2021, was never reconciled publicly. One of Terrencia's friends said only that she didn't owe anyone a full explanation of her private life, and maybe that's the most honest place this particular thread was ever going to land. What isn't in question is the timeline that mattered most. A proposal at Johnny T's in May of 2021, a ring she said yes to in front of everyone who loved her. And less than 13 months later, 4 a.m. on Fleetwood Drive, the same man who'd gotten down on one knee kicked in a door instead of knocking on it. 2 weeks before it happened, Terrencia had reposted something about being done settling for anything less than peace, about holding on to whoever brought her real calm. The night before, she reposted one more thing, that one day, she and the people she loved would be living so well that the bad days wouldn't even matter anymore. She never got to see that day. What she left behind is a daughter being raised on both sides of this story, a boyfriend who survived a night he shouldn't have, and a question this case never fully closes. How do you separate a pattern of persistence from a pattern of control, until it's already too late to matter? If this case affected you the way it affected everyone who followed it in Jackson, Mississippi, that's exactly why this channel exists, to look closely at the moments that got missed before they became headlines. Subscribe if you want to keep tracing those patterns with us, case by case. This has been the story of Terrencia Jackson,